Hey everyone, in this week's Trade to Black podcast, we talk psychedelics with Numinus Wellness CEO Payton Nyquvest. He shares with us how he's been fielding a lot of calls from institutions over the last 2 weeks. He also predicts a big run is on the horizon this fall in the psychedelic space. Why? He breaks it all down right now at our latest Trade to Black podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Trade to Black podcast. I am your host, Shad Dales. As usual, we want to hear from you. Leave a comment below because this week we are talking about psychedelics. So feel free to leave, obviously, a comment below. Subscribe to our channel if you like what we produce. And most importantly as well, click on that bell for all notification for latest news pertaining to psychedelics and all the other industries that we cover. As usual, before we get into this week's podcast, all views on the Trade to Black podcast and the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or guests as investment advice. The views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Okay, welcoming in the man in the middle, no stranger to TDR, Payton Nyquvest. He is the CEO of Numinus Wellness, which trades on the TSX under the ticker symbol NUMI. How are you, sir? The summer's going fast. I hope you've been enjoying it.
Been a good summer. Great to be here and good to see you guys.
You as well. Ben, good to see you, brother. Lead financial writer from TDR. How was the week?
Week was good. It was good to see the FOMO back. The market has a pulse again, and we hadn't seen that for a while. It's been building over the last few weeks, and this week some stocks took off, so good to see.
The industry or trade or profession that we have chosen, the worst months of the year seem to be the summer doldrums, and you kind of want to appreciate the moment with summer, do you not? But in some ways, we're very much looking forward to the fall. Are we not, Payton?
It's funny, in my previous life, August, we always say August and December are the two best buying months of the year, and you can usually set your clock by it, and usually by mid-July, there's a lot of moaning and groaning if you're not on vacation somewhere that the world's coming to the end. And by mid-September, that's a very long afterthought, and everybody's back in action again. So this totally feels, to Ben's point, feels very much like that. You can feel the momentum starting to pick up again, and I think going into the fall, things will be very much improved.
You agree with that, Ben? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I do that in a lot of ways. I see the technicals turning, and last time Payton was on, we talked about the critical mass theory, where it may not be like a single solo event like what a lot of people thought Compass Phase 2 would be. It's just a critical mass of good, positive results and the industry moving forward. And so I agree that there's a lot of momentum with the sector right now.
Well, we say no single event, but there was one single event, I think, that's really reignited this industry again. And we've talked about it a little bit with previous guests, Payton, but we haven't discussed with you. And it's this Netflix documentary with Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind, which trended top 5, I think, on Netflix worldwide for, I think still is, for like over a month. That really defines what a lot of these compounds are, led by LSD, MDMA, psilocybin. Did you get a chance to watch it? And if so, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's been a documentary that's been waiting in the wings for quite a while. Michael and his team were going to launch it actually this time last summer and decided not to do that with everything that was going on with COVID and stuff like that. And so it's kind of been the longest kept secret for quite a while. And so it's great to see it come out. And frankly, I think the timing now really couldn't be better. Unfortunately, the mental health conversation continues to, be a more and more serious and severe one. And but to your point, I think it's been a huge educator for people. I think the one thing that we continue to see in the psychedelic space is really just good education and good content out there that really explains what we're talking about in regards to psychedelics as a mental health treatment. And, I think that education coupled with, a huge move in the US biotech and healthcare space, to see psychedelics move in line with that more macro move, to me is a huge indicator that the market is now educated, and it understands the opportunity, and it's really great to see.
Well, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, you're absolutely right, and I think that's a validation too that you said it, that psychedelic stocks are moving in line with the biotech sector, which is a validation that it is genuine biotech, not its ugly sister or cousin or whatever. It's actually in line with traditional biotech stocks, and it's moving along with that. I also wanted to ask, we're starting to see financings come back in the sector. Freedom Biosciences, for example, they're developing a platform for psychedelic therapeutics, including ketamine. They raised $10.5 million, and we hadn't seen a lot of financings in the sector in recent weeks. Do you view that as a sign that money is coming into the sector with more institutional interest? And are you seeing more anecdotes of institutional interest on your side?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak directly to that. I've had more sophisticated inbound large capital phone calls over the last couple of weeks and months than I probably ever have since we started the company. And
what's been those conversations? That's interesting.
There's a lot of optimism in regards to obviously highlighted by President Biden and U.S. Ministry of Health posting, what they've posted around the expectation around regulation changes. The clinical data continues to be really compelling. And I think we've, as an industry, we've gone through, a typical phase of, we've gone through, a hype phase, which has brought in, really enough capital for most companies to get themselves in trouble with more than anything. But there's been a few companies that have raised enough capital and had sound enough business plans to really show, who are going to be the organizations that are really going to be able to take advantage of this huge opportunity and make a huge difference. And, for the larger institutions, the larger capital, they're happy to pay a little bit more for that clarity. And I think that clarity is here now, and they're starting to look at, who are going to be some of those organizations that are going to make, these massive societal changes that we need to see in regards to mental health. And so I think that's what you're seeing. The conversations that I'm having, it's a huge amount of positivity in terms of approvals. It's very much this kind of foregone conclusion mindset. And it's really just, what are the ways that companies are going to be able to create sustainable business models? And that's a lot of the conversations that we're having at the moment. To Ben's
do you think
point,
the industry's poised for a run this fall?
Oh, for sure. I don't think it's going to be the carte blanche. I think at one point in time there was something like 500 psychedelic companies, which is insane. I think it's going to probably go, the interest will go to a few of the larger sound names who obviously are capitalized and have clear paths in terms of revenue generation, but more importantly profitability, or a sound drug development path. And you've seen, Ben pointed out one financing. You saw the Brightmind guys do a bought deal or an overnight marketed deal this week. And the one financing that nobody's really been talking about is, that Atai financing for like $125 million of non-diluted debt cap. Like, that's a huge deal. And nobody's really talking about that. So you are quietly seeing quite a bit of capital come back into the space.
Now, I agree with Shad's point that how to change your mind is probably the biggest catalyst to this run to help change sentiment, which obviously had been not great over the past, a few quarters. Now, but we keep seeing, it seems like every month there's this great study that keeps validating the sector. This week it was a study to do with alcoholism, and
Yeah.
it showed that psilocybin with assisted therapy, there was an 83% decline in heavy drinking among participants versus 51% decline with the placebo group. It was a small study, of course, but that's just another study that seems to validate psilocybin and psilocybin assisted therapy. So are you amazed at, what these drugs can do? Everything from addiction to depression disorder. Does it amaze you sometimes?
It's interesting. My lens in this space, I am amazed by it, but I've also been a participant of that. As I've suffered with chronic pain my entire life, was being hospitalized 3 times a week, and due to my experiences with psychedelic therapy, I've completely alleviated something that I've struggled with since birth. So, to see that kind of validation as someone who's been very passionate about this space, it's amazing to see. And I think that's the kind of data that, that needs to continue to be out there. And I think, whether it's documentaries like the Netflix documentaries, or that continuing of just dripping of positive outcome after positive outcome, whether we're talking to regulators, investors, customers, clients, that is just extremely, extremely important.
I find that right now, when it comes to people like attending and taking these medications, they're starting to understand a lot more because it's starting to be talked about a lot more. I was watching Joe Rogan's podcast actually earlier this week. I don't know how accurate it is, but it was Ron White, the comedian, basically outlining what his journey was with ayahuasca. And I found it really interesting because he saw some stuff that was pretty intense while people actually were going through their journey. But as soon as they were done, they woke up with like the biggest smile they'd ever seen, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
I also have to bring up too, and this really grabbed my attention. And for anybody understanding about mainstream media, especially in the sports world, a lot of these personalities, I'm almost can convince you or tell you that these are not the people that they are in real life. These are characters that they provide. And Colin Cowherd came out, and what a story he came up with about comparing Aaron Rodgers and the benefits that he had with ayahuasca and his mental health as being like a hungover drunk party, like he was a teenager, and how he needed a wife to call him out on his shit and all of this stuff. And I couldn't help but think, well, that's just it. Like that's common sense and that's simple, but there are people in life that can't achieve those things. I lost a best friend to suicide that always wanted to be married, but he couldn't get out of his own way because he suffered from this. But I don't know if you got a chance to see that, or even read about it, but how far or how much more have you seen progression as people understanding what these compounds are producing? Because it still appears we have a long ways to go for some of these personalities to come out and have these opinions.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers has a great response to that, which is you didn't win 2 MVP NFL awards back to back. Good for him. So, I think unfortunately we're in this environment at the moment of what kind of headlines sell stories. And as much as we love to hear, a positive headline, we just talked about the research results. Unfortunately, the other side of that sells newspapers is people saying, disparaging things like that. And I can tell you firsthand, if you went on any of my DM inboxes on any of my social media accounts, or if you looked at our email inbox, of the amount of people who daily reach out to us saying, hey, thank you for sharing your story. And by the way, this saved my life also. If you ask me, like, what is the thing for me that's overwhelming, more often than not, it's the amount of people that reach out who share incredible stories. And, for someone like an Aaron Rodgers or other people with large platforms, to share that level of vulnerability. And, especially in the West, at times we see vulnerability as weakness.
Yeah.
The guy is able to be vulnerable again while winning 2 back-to-back MVP NFL titles. So say whatever you want. That speaks volumes, and I think, you know, to go back to the Netflix documentary, there just needs to be education out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is there's certainly, you know, a lot of stigma still. There's a lot of, you know, people talking about recreational use, and I think, you know, it points to the importance of really talking about that therapeutic container, because these are, you know, they're just tools, right? And they're how they're used is really what makes them effective. And the more we can highlight that, the more I think we can negate any it's a polite way to say this, any non-educated
Yeah.
uninformed opinions.
Uninformed, misinformed, all the above, right?
Well,
Um,
and I invite anybody at any time, if they want to go sit in an ayahuasca ceremony and get an education, I'm happy to join them for that too. So that's usually the best way to find out.
you were in Peru actually for 2 weeks recently.
Yeah, it was.
When you're sitting down with people that are garnering interest within your company, that say these institutions, um, I would have to think that someone who lives and breathes and is trying to obviously build a business that understands it, is that a big part of your conversation when speaking with a lot of these people, in addition to a pathway to generating revenue?
You know, I think me speaking from experience creates confidence. You know, I think so. And I would say on both sides, you know, I have experience supporting companies and know what that takes. But I do think there is something to really speaking from your experience. And, you know, you look at the work that Rick Doblin has done with maps as an example, right? There's a guy who has lived and breathed this, and his tenacity to run maps for 35 years and get MDMA to where it is. You know, a couple of Canadian public
I know.
companies who have popped up over the last couple of years, like, think that we've done an amazing job. You look at the job that someone like that has done, and that passion is because he's experienced it. He understands it.
Hmm.
He gets it. And I do think that you need that in order to really understand it. And
Hmm.
so I do think it's important, and I'm grateful that, you know, some of the experiences that I've been through, you know, can be of benefit to other people.
Yeah.
Now, Payton, in that vein, you know, you're one of the few public psychedelic CEOs that have come on the record and explained your experiences and demonstrated that you partake in them.
Yeah.
And not a lot of CEOs do that. And we had Kyle Kazan, who runs a public cannabis company in California, and he was mentioning how not a lot of CEOs really come on and explain their experience. They're more about their fiduciary obligations to their shareholders. They're more about that. Now,
Yeah.
my question is, do you think do you think it's important that more CEOs sort of get public about perhaps their psychedelic experiences, not try to hide it or try to keep it under wraps? Do you think that's important to get that message out there from the C-level executives out there?
You know, I think they're very personal experiences, and
Yeah.
and some people might be comfortable, and some people might not be comfortable. It's not really my place to necessarily tell other people what to do. You know, I know for myself personally, there's no way that I could have stewarded Numinus in the way that I have, and it's taken a heck of a lot more than just me. It's taken an amazing team of people that I have, you know, that surround me. But I know that I wouldn't be able to look through it through the lens that I am able to look through it because of the experiences that I have. And, you know, for me, when I started Numinus was, and this is kind of the mindset that I try to have every day, is because I've been in the patient chair, and because I know exactly, you know, from my own experience, what other people could potentially be experiencing. when we look to build and steer the company, it's through the eyes of what is the person in the chair, what do they want to see? And if I was back sitting in that chair, I would want to know that the person who's leading the organization knows and understands what I'm going through, because it is a deeply personal and unique experience. So I do think from a stigma standpoint, if people are comfortable and frankly, if they have had psychedelic experiences, a lot of these organizations, I don't know how much experience, a lot of those executives may have with these substances. And again, it's not my place to tell them what to do or what not to do. But I know for myself, we wouldn't have been able to be, I wouldn't have been able to be successful if I didn't have those experiences.
I've never seen an industry that is so personal to so many people. Even in finance, you speak to a lot of people. Everyone's been affected by this. If they haven't been, there's some sort of family member that's been, and it's a very delicate situation to obviously respect and appreciate, obviously, the history of it all. At the same time, too, you have to walk very cautiously on how you build a sustained model and not get capitalism in front of this, right?
Yep. It's funny, like this is a question that comes up a lot of the time. And,
I bet.
Especially in regards to talking to people who are passionate about this space is, how do we ensure that we keep client outcomes at the forefront and not profit? And from my vantage point, I actually love the fact that my opinion is that companies are going to be successful based off of client outcomes. A lot of these drugs, there's no patent protection on them. There's no way to have a predatory business model around them. A lot of it's going to come down to service and product efficacy, and the way to track that is client outcomes. And I think that's where groups are going to be successful. So I do think that there's this underlying real kind of thread that is keeping everybody tied to making sure that the best models are the ones that ensure the best outcomes for their clients. And, with that, I think the thing that I want to continue to see is, answering some of these questions around how do we engage more insurance providers? How do we make sure that it's accessible to diverse communities? And that's more than just, it's certainly the financial aspect to it, but it's also, and all of our therapists have cultural safety and humility training, and it's not us showing up to communities saying we're Numinus and we're here to fix you, but how do you actually empower communities and train the people within those communities to actually, work to heal their own communities. And I think that that's really important.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about training for sure in the past. One thing I want to bring up too, and I know, Ben, you probably want to bring this up as well, but I found this really interesting, and I don't want to read too much in between the lines, but you guys work closely, obviously, with Health Canada. You have a lot of great relationships there. And this week, you saw the news about Carolyn Bennett, who serves as the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and Associate Minister of Health Canada. She was in Oregon visiting the Oregon Health Authority, which gave a presentation at the state's framework for psilocybin services in manufacturing back on August 8th. Obviously, Oregon, with the passage back in November of 2022 during election time of ballot measure 109, which basically decriminalizes all drugs within the state of Oregon. It appears Oregon is really advancing quickly as far as this whole landscape. And what does that tell, I guess, Canadians with the health minister going down there and seeing, watching, consuming a lot of that information? Why do you think she made that trip? And what should we speculate as to what we could see in the future?
I think in regards to regulation and maybe touching on Canada first, is it's easy for us to kind of like point fingers at regulators and say you're not moving fast enough, or they're trying to get in the way of this. If you look at all that's happened in the last 18 months, I mean, we're talking about drugs that very much not that long ago were, in Schedule 1 and looking like that would always be the case, now gone from Section 56 exemption approvals, licensing, the building of an industry, the going public of companies, to the changing of the special access program. Like there's a huge amount of support and work that's been done in a very short period of time to make these therapies more accessible. And I think that signals that Health Canada is, taking this extremely seriously and is vigilantly looking to set up best practices. And I can share, from the conversations that we've had, they're very collaborative, they're very open. And, I think the special access program changes really highlighted the fact that they are listening to what us and others have to say, and they're making changes. And so I think, that signals, again, also the comments from Biden and the Ministry of Health show that changes are coming, and the intention is to make changes. And I think they know that this mental health, I think to call it an epidemic is to underscore it. Doesn't have solutions. Doesn't have solutions. Yeah.
You and I talked about in early COVID, when COVID starts to become an endemic, and I'm not sitting here like it may last forever, but the way we're handling it makes it feel like an endemic. But when the government tap starts, runs dry, and people aren't getting their money, and you go through obviously a recession, I see, like, I don't even know what to anticipate, obviously, in the next 6 months to a year and what we're going to endure. But you can see a lot of big investors are selling their positions in everything and are all getting on board with everything related to mental health right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think we fully understand or grasped on the idea as to what lies ahead until you're in that situation, right?
Yeah. I some of the scariest stats that I see, you look at suicide rates in veterans during COVID. Up 80%.
What was it? Was it up 80%?
Up 80%. You look at the two professions with the highest suicide rates are first responders and healthcare workers. So, the people who are supposed to be keeping us safe and the people who are trying to help us be healthy, those suicide rates are high, like skyrocketing. So what does that tell you about the system at the moment? The system is failing, and it needs new tools, and it needs new ways of treating people in a very, in the shortest time frame possible. And that's not to say that psychedelics are panaceas or magic pills. It takes a ton of work, but at least makes the work tangible. And I think we're at this tipping point now where something needs to change.
Well, I guess that none more so that exemplifies that than Utah, which has been sort of at the forefront of legalizing these clinics. And of course, Numinus purchased Novamind. The deal closed in June. So I want to ask you we're about 10 weeks in from the actual closing of the acquisition. How is the integration going so far, and what's on next operationally as the company closes out 2022?
It's interesting. Utah's a fascinating place. It's really, through the pandemic, it's really thrived actually through COVID. It was one of the places that had probably the lightest amount of restrictions and lockdowns, and the Novamind team and what they've created there continues to blow my expectations. And they've really done a very sound and intentional job of understanding what the model and platform is to deliver not just ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, but traditional mental health treatments coupled with ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, but also through the research work they're doing, a deep understanding of what's going to be necessary for all of these other compounds, whether it's MDMA, psilocybin, LSD, mescaline, DMT. And we're really excited about really growing upon, I think, a very, very solid foundation now. And so that's really for us what the next probably 6 to 12 months looks like, is growing that platform. And, we've mentioned Oregon. Obviously, we're keeping a very close eye on what's happening there. California, continues to make indications that it's moving in the right direction, other than unfortunately some last news that just came out of there. But I don't think that that's stifled things too much. And then, MAPS with MDMA, we're potentially 12 months out from MDMA being approved, which means, it's time to get going now. And so, training
What a day.
practitioners, building more sites, and getting prepared for that. So we'll continue to expand that, but also, obviously keeping a close eye on what's happening in the markets. As we mentioned, we've continued to move towards a more senior U.S. listing, which we do anticipate in the fall or early winter time. So we're excited about that, and just continue to serve more and more people.
And it's worth noting too that the deal with that Numinus made with Novamind, it was an all stock deal, right? So you preserved most of the cash on your balance sheet. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's about 40 over 40 million as of the last financial. Yeah.
Yep. Correct. Well capitalized and don't need to go to market anytime soon for any capital. And obviously, looking at the fall, there's going to be a lot of companies racing to the trough to raise money, and we're in a fortunate position where we don't have to do that, and and just continue to execute. And if you look at our quarter over quarter financials, we've continued to execute, grow the business, increase margins, increase revenue, and show a really clear path to profitability, which, not to speak disparagingly about other companies in the space, but I think we've really kind of set ourselves apart in terms of, how do you create a sustainable model that makes money?
I think, from what I'm seeing, especially like the big takeaway here is that you think we're poised for a run here this fall in the industry. I think there's going to be a lot of new companies that come to market, but it's new people and new faces. And I think if like what I'm trying to communicate to my audience is like, look, this isn't cannabis. And I think people understand that now. It's not the next cannabis. And a lot of the people I think that were involved when a lot of these companies, like you said, the 500 that were looking to go public, were very much involved in the Canadian capital markets perspective and a lot of these fly-by-night deals, and they track back to obviously the cannabis run. But a lot of doctors I'm seeing now are getting more and more involved, that are leaving their companies with pharma companies, starting their own businesses, raising money. So it's becoming a growth of an industry, and more smarter and sophisticated people are getting involved. That's what I see. And I think that is only going to benefit, obviously, the industry if you start to like wean out, as I said, the people that don't really understand it. And I think that's important for people to get smart and re-engage in the industry again, because like you said, we have a mountain of things that we're going to have to tackle related to mental health, and it's happening now, right?
Yep, exactly.
We'll let you run heading into the fall season. So enjoy the fall weather. What's life like in Vancouver on the West Coast in the fall?
Continues to be hot and sunny. Today's a little dicey, but
He almost sounded like a weatherman there, didn't he, Ben?
What's that?
The way he was just, it was like sunny and a chance of like showers. It was like you're a weatherman there for a second.
When you're on the west coast of Canada, weather's usually, at least it's always a top 3 trending topic when you're in conversation with anybody. So.
What are some cool questions we could ask you outside of you being a CEO that would find interesting for our viewers? What's your favorite food?
Cool.
It's a favorite food.
I have to say, coming back from Peru, Peruvian food might be my new.
It's that good.
It is so good. It's you can't find a bad. I was in the Andes and I tried really hard and I couldn't find a bad meal just about anywhere. So.
Okay, so what's the most unique place that you've ever visited in the world?
So I'll keep on with that thread, but I ended up in some pretty amazing sacred indigenous sites with some indigenous families in Peru that
wow.
I definitely would not have stumbled upon on the regular tourist track. So
okay, let me ask you this. I have a good one, and especially since you are very public with your participation in the industry with ayahuasca and the bit. If you are hiking in the mountains near BC, in the foothills, and you see a fly agaric mushroom, do you consume it?
A which mushroom?
a fly agaric.
I've never heard.
Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's the red one with the little white dots that makes you feel like flying.
Amanita muscaria mushroom. That's what.
Yeah, I said the normal name, but yeah, that one.
I appreciate the effort, Ben. That's close, Ben.
Well, so I wouldn't consume it only because I know that consuming the raw mushroom leads to quite a discomfortable experience. But I also do know that Scandinavian shamans would regularly drink the urine of reindeer because they actually consumed the Amanita muscaria mushroom, and that it actually led to a much more profound experience.
Wow.
So I encourage anybody to Google the Santa Claus story and Amanita muscaria mushroom if you're looking for something to do on a late weekend night. It's a pretty entertaining hypothesis on where the story of Santa Claus came from. So,
wow, is that a true story?
Yeah,
might be.
Yeah,
but the reindeer Scandinavian shaman story is a true story.
Wow.
Oh. There you go.
So why does Rudolph have a red nose? Maybe there's more to the story, right?
That's right. Well, if you see me hanging around with a pack of reindeer up in the mountains, you'll know what I'm up to. So,
gents, appreciate obviously the check-in. Great takeaway here, but obviously exciting to see if we can see an industry that you think is poised to do a big rebound this fall, which I think a lot of investors are. And for the most part, people that obviously are in need of this is excited to see, obviously, the growth of the industry. Anyway, appreciate you checking in. Let's keep in touch.
Likewise. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Payton.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, wait until you see what we have next. Some of the best thought leaders in the verticals that we cover, from cannabis and psychedelics to cryptos and NFTs and sports wagering. So if you want to learn more, make sure to click on that bell for all notifications. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.